So what is a block to love? A block to love is a painful, implicit memory from your past relationships, particularly from your relationships with your parents, and that often get reinforced in future relationships. A painful, implicit memory. So what is an implicit memory? We have two kinds of memory for humans. We have explicit memory and we have implicit memory. Explicit memory is the kind of memory most of us are familiar with. It has the sense of recalling something, either a fact or an event. So if you were to ask me, Eric, what did you do for your birthday last year? I have the sense of recalling what I did for my birthday last year, and I tell you as much as I can about that. That would be an episodic explicit memory, an event from my life. Or you might say, Eric, what is a brainstem? And I say a brainstem is the oldest part of the brain. It's also known as the reptilian brain, and I'm recalling whatever facts that I've remembered explicitly. Explicit memory requires conscious attention. Hence my different tricks to try to keep you present with me. Otherwise you're not going to remember anything, and it's not such a valuable way to spend your time. And there's the hippocampus. The hippocampus is the part of the brain that stores explicit memory. It does other things as well, but that's one of its functions. Questions about explicit memory? It's pretty straightforward. That sense of just recalling something from the past. Implicit memory is a different kind of mysterious and often difficult kind of memory. And in terms of our topic on relationships this evening, one of the most important things to know about implicit memory is it's the memory that's happening when you're getting triggered. When you're having the reaction, when your body's getting tense, or you're starting to explode with something, or say things that you regret, or do things that you regret, you're probably having an implicit memory without even knowing it. There's no sense of recall with an implicit memory. It just comes. And it's done by the amygdala. So here's what's happening with an implicit memory. The amygdala is always asking, am I safe? Do I matter? Am I safe? Do I matter? It's taking in the information that's coming in through our senses, and it's checking, am I safe? Do I matter? 4 times a second. It's checking, am I safe? Do I matter? Am I safe? Do I matter? And it's basing that, it's evaluating that against the past. It's looking for anything in the present that looks similar to painful, dangerous, threatening things from the past that are unresolved. So a classic example would be a friend of mine who was in the Vietnam War. Lots of threatening, dangerous, life-threatening explosions and loud sounds and so on. When he came back to America, whenever there'd be a loud sound, he'd have an implicit memory, and he would dive for cover. So he'd be walking down the street, and a car would backfire, and he would dive into the bushes. Because his amygdala was measuring that sound coming into the senses, going, that's similar to that bomb, and we're diving for the bushes. And that's because one of the things that gets stored as an implicit memory is the behavior that was linked to the original painful event. So diving for cover is the behavior that got stored. The emotion that was part of that original event gets stored. The fear, the terror, or whatever it was. The perception, that loud sound, sensations in the body, and something called a mental model, which are fundamental beliefs about how the world works or about how we can be in the world. Does not require conscious attention, implicit memory. It just goes in without effort or intention. So here's a story that I think will help you understand this very clearly. There was a neuroscientist in the 19th century named Dr. Calvert. And Dr. Calvert had a patient with a damaged hippocampus. So what does that mean about her memory? No explicit memory. Her hippocampus isn't working. She can't store explicit memory. So, someone said that's good for relationships. No way, not really. Every time she came for an appointment, they would start over, brand new, because she wouldn't remember the last time. So that would tell me that it was probably the hippocampus in her right hemisphere, because it's the hippocampus in the right hemisphere that stores events. The hippocampus in the left hemisphere stores facts. So we have two hippocampi. Maybe both were damaged, I don't know. Anyway, Dr. Calford's trying to figure out what's going on with her memory. He comes up with this kind of sort of devious, sickening kind of plan, but he puts a pin in his hand. He hides a pin in his hand. And she comes for her appointment, and they shake hands like they always do, and she gets pricked, of course. And they have their appointment. Somehow, I don't know how they would have their appointment on there, but they do whatever they do. She goes home, and then she comes again for her next appointment. This time, Dr. Kelford does not have a pin in his hand. And he goes to shake her hand, and instead of shaking her hand, she pulls away. Now, why would she pull away if her hippocampus had stored that memory? Because the implicit memory is still working. The amygdala was not damaged. So he asked her, why don't you want to shake my hand? Because he knows she doesn't remember any of the past sessions. Her hippocampus isn't working. She does not say, oh, because last time I shook your hand, you pricked me with a pin, you jerk. Because she doesn't have that memory to recall explicitly. She answers with a mental model. She formed a belief, and that was her answer. She said, because sometimes doctors do things that hurt you. And that was her new belief about how the world works, based on her traumatic experience with that doctor. And that poor woman, probably ever after, had a really hard time shaking hands with men in general, especially ones that looked like Dr. Calford.